Hello everyone. Like in one of the videos, we got a comment to make a video on what it takes to be a good cloud architect. Or his question was, what are the interview questions that are asked in an interview for a cloud architect? Which is the essence of making this video. This video does not just benefit that person, but also benefits the overall cloud community and few aspirations who want to work in cloud, be a developer or further that, be a good architect. So without further ado, let's get started. Please like, subscribe, share this channel to help the channel grow and spread the wealth of knowledge across other people. So for this video, what we have done is we surveyed a lot of our consultants and work in cloud primarily, and we took their input in terms of what exactly it takes to be a good cloud architect. Now, you would have seen a slide similar to this, and you would see this diagram a lot of times where what AWS mentions is that to have a well-architected framework, you have to have these 6 pillars. That is operational excellence, security, reliability, performance and efficiency, cost optimization, and sustainability. I won't go into the details of this, but what I wanted to do is kind of provide our take on what we have seen in the industry and come up with something similar to what AWS has provided. And this is where our diagram is in terms of what constitutes cloud. Cloud, we know some people say it's a data center sitting somewhere, but essentially it's more than that. It's not just a data center. It is a kind of a environment or it's like a setup that suits you. It'll help you in if you use it the right way. You need to understand what constitutes cloud. These are the 6 pillars that we consider. We have our experience in the industry is something that somebody who's aspiring to be a cloud architect or interview a well-rounded architect, they should be looking into this. And a lot of times, a lot of our consultants, our employees, they get this question, which one do you specialize in? In our opinion, if somebody is just good at security, that may work if you're sitting on-prem, but in cloud, you should understand the end-to-end setup of how cloud works. You just can't say that I'm good in DevOps. You need to understand the whole gamut of how things work, because cloud again is very accessible. You could go and spin up your infrastructure yourself. You could just pay with a credit card. You could see the workings of it. So you don't really need the access to be provided to you and make those sort of excuses, because on-prem, it was a closed box. Because networking, there was a separate division. They probably wouldn't even let you go and next to the data center. But cloud is not, none of that applies. So I'll just go deeper into a few specific things because I didn't want to make this a long video. I wanted to provide the right information about our experience about architecture, and these are the aspects. On architecture, what I'll just mention is there are multiple architectures. There is microservices architecture, there is an ESB architecture, service-oriented architecture is there is a data pipeline architecture, there is big data architecture, there's an ETL architecture. There's so many architecture patterns out there that you have to understand your application requirements, and which is where one of the things that we constantly say is that you have to understand, apart from the functional requirements, you have to understand the non-functional requirements. Please drop in a comment if you want to get a video, or no, we can make another video of the non-functional requirements that you should consider. But what do I mean by non-functional requirements? So, okay, let me take it back. What do I mean by functional requirements? What I mean by functional requirements is, like say if there's a business, they want to make a certain website, and we have built a lot of websites for the customers. So let me just take the website example. They will say that I want this image, I want this layout, I want this particular pages navigation menu. So they are going to provide those basic functions. I want to have a comment form, I want to have this shopping cart thing. So they're going to give you all those functional requirements, and that is what it'll come down. But what are the non-functional requirements? And sometimes the business may not think about that. So that is where it's your job as an architect to elicit these requirements from the business to understand what exactly they anticipate of the performance. So first things that you will want to know is the performance of the application, the scalability. How do they expect the scalability? What about high availability? What about the downtime of the application? How much downtime? What is the downtime window that they assume? Because if you do have to do any patching of it, how do they see it? And what about disaster recovery? How they are going to consider it? Because then you will have to consider a few recovery point objective, recovery time objective. Those few metrics you will have to consider as part of the non-functional requirements. And what I like to tell, right, like architects, especially cloud architects, unlike the application architects who are focused on the functional requirements, cloud architects, they will also need to consider the non-functional requirements very importantly. So for being a good cloud architect, architecture is going to be very important. And one of the things is architecture. And out in the architecture, there are multiple patterns. Drop in a comment if you want to go into detail of any specific pattern. We have done every pattern probably possible with a lot of our customers, but especially non-functional requirements is very, very important. So I'll get to security, and security is a broad term itself, right? So every pillar here is broad. It's not that one of them is kind of less, but security, it's because you have to start security on day zero, I would say. Probably before even working with the business or working on project, you will have to understand what is the current organization setup? What is the current organization culture? And that is why I'm saying it is a day zero work that needs to be done. You may need to understand a few aspects. Maybe for them, the organization may not be that secure, have that good a security posture as you intend it to be. So that is where you may want to have a culture change or start having those thought process how you would want to work with the business or the application team members. But security is very important. What makes a security? It's going to be infrastructure security. It's going to be network security. Of course, it's going to be application security. There's going to be DevSecOps. That's when you do automation. You will want to have security as part of it. There's going to be code scanning and other things that will part of the pipeline, and I'll go into those details next. And then there's going to be operational level security that you'll have to do. And then not just that, there's going to be testing. In terms of pen testing, you will have to do load testing, and all those security is going to be very, very important. And as soon as you will go to dev, to then SQA, to prod or UAT. When you start going to hybrid environments, your security posture will need to start increasing as well compared to dev environment, because dev environment is mainly for developers who may have a lot more access compared to QA, where developers can have less access, and then UAT or prod environments depending on your organization setup. So security is very important. It's a very big topic, but drop in a comment if any specific thing you want to get into. So then the DevOps is very important. Automation, like we at Arina Technologies sincerely believe that without automation, if you try to move to cloud, that's a wrong setup. It's an incorrect setup. And if you have to then look to change it later, you may not be able to do it, because then your structure is going to be so bloated and your team may not be able to adopt to it. And we have so many stories of customers who moved to cloud, didn't have DevOps on day one or even thought about it, that eventually it became so difficult to them. And then they used to have these constantly weekly meetings on why the cost is so high. And one of the things that they never ever were able to do was DevOps, which is where, as part of cloud, always have DevOps or automation as part of your setup there. Now, DevOps, there are a few things that are there in DevOps, but there are two primary ones. One is infrastructure as a code. The other is CI/CD, which is continuous integration and continuous deployment. So for DevOps, for infrastructure as a code, as the name says, it is what you do is you write code that will spin up your infrastructure. There are a lot of popular cloud native and third party available, but the cloud agnostic one or the third party one, which is very popular in the industry, is Terraform by HashiCorp. Terraform, it has many flavors in itself. All right. There's a Terraform open source one that you could kind of use. There is a Terraform Cloud for Business. That is a license model. There's a Terraform Enterprise as well that provides different aspects of it. But Terraform is very popular that you could use to spin up your infrastructure. If you go with AWS, it recommends using CloudFormation. They don't recommend, but that's the de facto tool. If you want to spin up in AWS, CloudFormation is very closely integrated with a lot of the services. Then Terraform maybe, because it could be that if there's a new service released in AWS, CloudFormation will have that integration sooner compared to Terraform, because that API, but the way how Terraform works is via API integration. So it could be that the community will take time in integrating that particular module with the API. So that is where CloudFormation could be useful. We used to do a lot of coding with ARM templates as your resource manager, and now of late it's Biceps. So they're also equally popular. And Google, they did start off with their own deployment manager perspective, but now Google also is recommending just to stick with Terraform and use it to deploy their infrastructure, and it is a good integration for Google as well. So that says it for infrastructure as a code. For CI/CD, that is again is a pipeline that you could do to deploy your code once the infrastructure is spun up. So what I mean by is that if you have a Kubernetes application, or you have a Cloud Function application. You do a code change. You won't go to the portal and just deploy the code there. What you will do is you will want to have a pipeline. It is probably integrated with GitHub or any other version control system, and that could in itself trigger off the pipeline that will go and deploy the code. So it's a good security posture. It's automated. Deployments are seamless, and you can track, you can have more compliance in terms of who has done the deployment and for what was the reason of doing the deployment. So and similarly to other environments, as and when you start going to higher environments from dev to SQA to UAT to prod, you will want to start having more control on the pipelines. That is, you will want to have approval in place. You will want to have DevSecOps in place. You want to have code scanning in place so that there is no keys that are there that are in the code. That will also be a code review for the people. So that is something that you will want to start integrating as part of your pipeline. So DevOps automation is very important for cloud, and for being a cloud architect, it is important that you understand these things, that these technologies, how they work. Terraform is very popular in the industry. You will get a lot of questions. And if you have to really be a good cloud architect or even be shortlisted for the interview, you will want to understand these key concepts. Like Terraform is very popular among them. And now I come to the application data part, right? Because it's very rare that you can be a good cloud architect without understanding truly how the application aspects work. Because gone are the days that you're sitting on-prem, you could say, I'm an infrastructure architect and I only take care of infrastructure. Oh, I'm a security guy. I only will take care of these things. So I think gone are those days. It's becoming a very closed thing. One person will need to be having a good understanding. May not be an expert, but at least a good understanding is expected to be a good cloud architect. And that is where the application or data is something that we consider as very important. Cannot be an architect without considering this. And when I say application, you will have one of the things I was mentioning, right? At the starting of the video, what are the different architecture patterns? You will want to consider, once the pattern is identified, say I'm going with a microservices architecture. Which pattern do I want to go with? Do I want to go with serverless? That is, I could go with, say, REST API, and in there, should I go with REST API or GraphQL? There's a plethora of choices one will need to make depending on the non-functional requirements that will be part of the architecture. But you will need to understand, because it could be that your microservice is better suited for using Kubernetes because you have a huge requirement and eventually you foresee a huge demand growth. So Kubernetes will be right set up for you compared to a serverless architecture or cloud native architecture. Likewise, data. What is the data? Do you want a data pipeline? Is it going to be a data warehouse? How is it stored? How is the data ingested? What is the data egress setup going to be there? So those are things that you will have to consider in terms of your application and data, and depending on the cloud. Now, of course, this is a broad world. No one expects you to know everything. But now say you're interviewing in AWS for a position of cloud architect. So a few things that you would want to understand in data, like Glue. Glue is for the ETL job. You will want to consider other technologies that are there in terms of the data aspect. Redshift is another for a data warehouse perspective you will want to consider, and you will want to consider data cataloging. Right, you will want to consider data pipeline in terms of these Glue services that are there. Other good things that are considered in AWS, like for data perspective, like SQS, a simple queue service is what you will need to consider. Azure, it is going to be Service Bus. Google, it's going to be PubSub. So these services that you should definitely read, understand the workings of it. You don't need to be an expert, but do understand these things because that is what the expected is for the application and data aspect of it. So we'll move on to the cost aspect. So we can cover all these four aspects. Now, as we have the architecture in place, we understand the requirements, both functional and non-functional. We have now come up with an architecture. Now, it could be that we have 2 or 3 architecture patterns in place. That could be a good option. How will we decide which one we want to go with? Unlike on-prem, you could say, okay, I could just deploy it anywhere. Anyways, I have paid for it for 6 months. I have used depreciation to take a loss of it, because a lot of companies do consider that. For a cloud, it could be an operating cost, but when you do on-prem, they use depreciation to reduce the taxes, and we do. So that is a different discussion. But point is, cost is important in cloud, and we have made a lot of videos how to go about calculating cost in Azure, in AWS, right? And probably in Google also we have done. But if not, drop in a comment and I can easily make one how to go about calculating cost. So it's a very important part of a FinOps process, that is a financial operation process on a cost calculation, and it's a very good input. It's a needed input for the business to understand what their cost 6 months, 1 year, and a lot of businesses also project for 5 years what their cost is going to be. So it's very important to understand this key metric to know which architecture is going to be working in the long run. So now once we have done this, our application is done, development, and now it's all looking good. So what are the things we have to consider for operational aspect? So for an architect, especially one who is considering to be a good senior architect or a principal architect, what they will need to consider is, I will of course need to have alerting in place, the metrics that one needs to monitor, how I can automate it. That is where, again, infrastructure as a code would be very useful for you. But now also what I will need to consider is the dashboards, the structure of the setup that needs to be done, the alerting, the billing dashboards that need to be done. If I need to integrate with, say, a lot of organizations may have the existing hybrid architecture where they have the setup on-prem and they want to send the logs to on-prem. So if they want to do that, then how will that architecture be? Are they going to be using Splunk, which is a tool for security, incident, event monitoring, is very popular, along with other tools as well. But one of the tools that I've seen a lot in industry is Splunk, something that one should definitely read on if you want to be a good cloud architect. So you should check it out. For dashboarding, you will want to look into tools such as Grafana, Kibana. Kibana is for Elasticsearch. You could also get it in OpenSearch, but you should definitely read on those tools, understand because for dashboarding, they're very popular. There are a lot of APM tools, which is application performance monitoring tools, such as Datadog, such as AppDynamics, and a lot of other ones that are very popular, and a lot of times they will be used across the cloud spectrum for you to do the setup. So I hope this video was able to provide a good broad understanding on what the pillars of cloud are. This is our take on the pillars and what it takes to be a cloud architect, the technologies that one needs to consider. Of course, it comes with experience, but this could be a good starting point for you to see which one you want to get into, but also pay attention to things that are happening in other verticals for you to take your career path. So please like, subscribe, share the video, and drop in a comment of any other videos that you would like us to create. Thank you and have a good day.